and welcome to Long Live Hooky Street, the podcast where we rewatch and discuss every episode of Britain's most beloved TV comedy, Only Fools and Horses. I'm Heather, and I'm joined from Denver, Colorado by my co-host and sister, Jenny. Say hello, dude.
Hello. Yes, I've moved.
So today we are discussing Series 2, Episode 5, The Yellow Peril. So grab a rum and pep, and let's get started.
This episode aired on the BBC at 8:30 p.m. on November 18th, 1982. Still airing after Sorry and ending right before the 9 o'clock news. The number one movie at the UK box office was still Tron, and the UK number one song was still I Don't Want to Dance by Eddie Grant. Viewing figures were back down slightly this week to 8.2 million. A couple of interesting little episode facts here. So John Sullivan got the idea for this episode from an incident in Mitcham at the time. There had been a break-in in a paint store, and the perpetrators had been parked in a garage and caught immediately by the police. Apparently they had left a yellow line of paint behind them when they drove away, all the way from the store to their garage.
Wow, that's pretty dumb.
Too funny. So this is the most we've heard so far about Del and Rodney's mother. So the first time we hear her full name, and we also learn that she died on March 12, 1964. So for the daylight scenes in the cemetery, they're using Kensal Green Cemetery in North Kensington. The nighttime shots were filmed at Walpole Park in Ealing, which was very close to Oaklands Road, where the establishing shot of the Golden Lotus was filmed. So just the outside shot. Another interesting fact about this episode is that the studio filming for this and A Touch of Glass were all done on one day. So just the studio scenes, not the location. Because there was so much location filming in both of those two episodes that not much studio was required. So it made sense to do it all in one day. So it mentions in the, so assuming that means the same laugh track for the studio. So that's the same audience watching the studio scenes for this and A Touch of Glass. And it mentions in the Lovely Jubbly book that if you look at the flat scene in this episode, you can see, and The Touch of Glass, that none of the stuff has moved. So the curtains and the export spirits are all in exactly the same place. So we've got finally Mr. Chin was played by Rex Y, who passed away in 2006 at the age of 73. Apparently the part was supposed to be played by actor Vincent Wong, who had appeared in many James Bond movies such as Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever, but it doesn't say why it wasn't him. So I don't know what the reason was. Maybe he dropped out at the last minute. So that's all I have for the episode facts. Shall we move on to our episode rankings?
Yes, let's do that. So if you don't already know, and that probably means that you are new to the podcast, so you should definitely subscribe. As always, we have each independently ranked all 64 episodes, and we are now going to reveal and compare our rankings for this episode. So what is your ranking for The Yellow Peril out of 64?
Okay, so my ranking for The Yellow Peril is number 43.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And why have you ranked it 43?
I mean, I love this episode. I think it's great. It fell down a little bit lower, probably just because, again, more memorable episodes are above it. But I love this episode. I think it's really good. I love Mr. Chin. I love all the back and forth dialogue. I think it's quick paced. It's well written. And I think it's got a good ending. So, yeah, I like it. I think it just fell down because of the perhaps more memorable ones to me above it. What about you, dude?
Well, I ranked this as 53
that's so
out
low.
of 64. And this was an episode that I re-ranked when I went back after watching it.
Oh.
Because I realised that I'd ranked it quite high originally. And actually, that was not where I wanted to put it.
Ah.
So after rewatching this, I actually think this episode is a little bit bland. It's got some memorable stuff in it just because of the plots. Like all of the plots, I think, for Only Fools and Horses are quite memorable across the board. But I don't think this episode is that strong regarding sort of laughs. When I was rewatching it, I did find, there's a lot of nice sort of dialogue, obviously always, between the characters, and maybe a lot more, as you said, history is mentioned. But for me, I don't think this is a strong contender for a funny episode, which is honestly what I'm mostly looking for from Only Fools and Horses, with the odd exception. So yeah, I think that's why it ended up, a bit lower. And if I'm even looking at like all of season 2, series 2, I don't really go to this episode to watch it. Because I think if you're watching this for the first time, you get more out of it. But once you've watched it once, you know what happens, the reveal. at the end and everything. So yeah, I think that's why I didn't rank this as that high comparatively to other episodes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so we'll go ahead and I'll just say that the IMDb ranking for this one is quite high. It's 24. And I think that's because there are a handful of episodes that end up high ranked because they are they have something in them that people remember as like a big thing, and this luminous paint and the Chinese takeaway are a thing that people remember. So I think that happens. That makes sense. It's almost in the same like line of people remembering the chandelier scene. They remember, and I remembered the big bright yellow walls. So yeah, it's memorable for that reason, and it's actually it's a clever plot line. It's a well-written story. Like, it's a good idea he had, because the paint in the little story from Mitchum was not luminous. So yeah, it's like a good little idea that he had about them getting luminous paint off Trigger. And of course, we love to see Trigger back. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I can see why it fell down low for you. That's quite low, a lot lower than I maybe expected for you, and like very different.
Yeah, like I said, it was higher. I think I ranked this as like 41 originally, and then I realized that it shouldn't be that high on my rankings, because I realized sort of where I put like No Greater Love, and I would say these episodes are kind of similar for me with rewatchability, and that was sort of 50 something, and I was like, oh, I need to knock this one down, and I redid some. Yeah, I actually had a big reshuffle of my rankings recently, so yeah. This one got the chop to be lower down on the list. So yeah,
sure,
that's all I have to say.
Okay,
so shall we go ahead, start the episode breakdown?
Yeah, go ahead with the breakdown then, dude.
Okay, so this episode begins in Mr. Chin's restaurant. So Del is making a deal, and he tells him that
today is the anniversary of my late mother's passing from this immortal curl.
He always says his late mother, or his late mother's death, and then with death as well. It's kind of implied. There's not much happens in this scene, really. All we find out is that Del's got a deal going. I don't even think we know that he's painting the Chinese takeaway. I think we find that out in the next scene when he says it to Rodney. So I think it's just we see this interaction that Del's got a deal going with Mr. Chin.
Yeah,
and that's
think
it.
So. Yeah.
There is one little bit here that I think is quite funny, because it's just a very short scene where Mr. Chin says, "Cheerio." And Del looks surprised because Del says, I think,
"Sayonara."
And this is a trope that was used in a lot of the Carry On films, where they had what they would consider to be foreign characters saying very British things. I remember this was always something that the Carry Ons played on.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, again, just something that people found funny at the time. But yeah, so that's really all I have to say about that scene. It's very short. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I wrote here was that it's the first time we see Del do the out of order thing on the meter, which is a running gag throughout all of Only Fools and Horses, because later they have like the bag over the meter, or they put the midwife on emergency call sign on the car. So like he never pays for parking. Yeah, that carries on throughout the whole of the show.
So then we go to the next scene, which is in the cemetery. So this is quite interesting that we don't sort of go to the flat first. I always felt there's something that's quite unique about this episode, to sort of go to the cemetery. The next time we're in the cemetery, I think, is one door closes after this. I don't think we're there again until that episode.
Probably right.
So yeah, so quite nice, as you say, to have a bit of background. So this conversation with Del and Rodney is quite lengthy, and I'm just trying to think of some highlights here. So yeah, we see their mom's grave is very extravagant. This is something that's quite funny, and you can totally imagine Del like doing that when his mom died. And yes, he says that she died 17 years ago. So I'm sure you wrote that down for continuity purposes. And then Rodney mentions that the grave
looking a bit tatty nowadays.
And Del mulls over what he can do to make it look better, and he starts listing all these things that he can do. And then Rodney says,
if you added fiberglass models of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, you couldn't alter the effect of that.
Oi, 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 oi. Don't start getting sacrificial.
So Del chastises him for not feeling anything. That this is quite a harsh thing, I think, for Del to do here. He's quite harsh to Rodney, the way he sort of goes,
look at you now, loafing about around your mother's graveside. Don't you feel any emotion?
It's sort of like, sort of making fun of him almost for his lack of emotion. And then, Rodney has this very, understandable response.
I didn't know Mum that well, did I? When she died, I was just a little nipperoonie, all odd socks and eczema. Now you feel a sense of personal loss. Me, Just feel cheated.
And this is something I don't think we've ever really had before at this to this point, which I think is quite sad, actually.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get Del apologising, which is not something we see very often. But in this situation, Del apologises to Rodney, which is nice. He should do. And then Del has a funny line here where he says, when he's describing their mother, and he says,
She had long golden blonde hair, sometimes.
And we hear a story that Del's mom was in the pub with him when he was still at school. And this is a story that Del tells to show how caring their mother was.
But every night she used to send across 2 or 3 pints of light and bitter, or whiskey if she was flush. Come about 10 o'clock, she'd look over where I was sitting and she'd shout, "Come on, Del boy, get off home to bed. School in the morning."
So that's not a very responsible mother, but Del looks at this as a really nice thing that his mom did to show that she was a nice woman, and that Rodney was outside in the pram.
I know.
And again, I didn't really get the punchline of this story because Rodney says,
Where was I then?
He was outside in the pram eating an arrowroot.
Was you worried?
No, it's only an old pram.
and then Del says,
Oh, it's all right, put it in your leg. Old pram. Of course she was worried.
as though that's a good thing then. Oh, it's okay to leave him outside in the pram because she was worried about him being outside in the pram.
I don't think the audience got that either. I think it made it sound like he was saying, "No, I'm only kidding. You weren't outside in the pram." But instead he was like, "No, I'm only kidding." Of course she was worried that you were outside by yourself.
So that's a bit weird, yeah, that one. There was a really nice moment here I wrote down where I think Rodney rests his head on Del's arm. I think that's lovely. It's like these two brothers very comfortable around each other. You don't see that very often, like that touchy-feely thing. So that was really, really nice. And then Rodney's sort of drifting off to sleep, and then Del starts sort of talking all this crap, and Rodney's just listening, sort of half listening. And Del throws into the middle.
You're decorating the kitchen of a Chinese takeaway tomorrow.
And then, of course, we find out what the scheme is, that Del has been making this deal with Mr. Chin, who we just met in the last scene, and they're going to paint the Chinese takeaway. And he says that Rodney needs to do it because he has a GCE in art, and that's why he decided Rodney was going to do it. And Rodney refuses, and then we get this whole sequence of Del emotionally blackmailing Rodney again. Again, something we see a lot of times happening, and he always goes to the...
I remember what Mum said to me on her deathbed.
I do think this is quite a funny line where Del says,
Del boy.
Stuttered, did she?
and then Del pulls this really angry face at Rodney, and I think it's quite funny. And again, Rodney apologizes immediately because he knows not to mess with Del when it comes to their mum. And then it's Del talks about sharing everything with Rodney, and these again is all manipulation to try and get him to paint the Chinese takeaway. And Del says,
That's what I've always done. Half of everything I've got. I mean, fair enough, I ain't got nothing, but half of it is yours.
And he even mentions here a Rolls Royce, which I think is really interesting because maybe that's why John Sullivan chose to use that in Time in Our Hands as the thing that Rodney bought for Del, because of this conversation.
Sure, yeah, I put that in my notes as well because he specifically says if he had 2 Rolls Royces, he'd give him one. Yeah, and then it's actually Rodney that buys Del a Rolls Royce.
I think that's quite a nice callback if that was what it was. So yeah, I think that's really nice. I do like the line where he says,
"You'd nick the hole out of me last polo if I didn't keep my mouth shut."
But yeah, so we start listing all the things that Rodney wants to, or Rodney thinks that Del would have. As I just mentioned, the Rolls Royce. Then he says,
"What'd you do if you had 2 of them deep sea divers watches?"
Now you know I got 2 of them deep sea divers watches.
And then he says that he can have one of the deep sea divers watches, but Rodney's still not biting. And then the ending of the scene is a bit weird because we've had quite a meaningful conversation here, and then it just goes straight down to the lowest common denominator, which is porn.
Yeah.
I'll give you a lend of me dirty books.
Yeah, all right then.
But yeah, I mean, I think because of Rodney's age, like that's totally the thing that he would go for. I mean, he always seems to get Rodney with money or like in case like a girl or porn or something. So it's just Rodney's character. He's young, goofy and horny, and like Del knows because Del's been that age. So yeah, he knows.
Yeah, true. I mean, I would have thought in a house full of men that the dirty books would have been very easy to get hold of if they were in someone else's room. You just go in and take them. I would have thought.
I don't know. I don't know how brothers share porn.
No, I don't either. But I would have assumed that was the case anyway. But yes, so So yeah, that's all I had for that scene. Anything you want to add to that, dude?
Not much, no. Only one note that you didn't, that you did mention, but I'll just elaborate on it a little bit. Is the dates and the ages and stuff. So we'll sum this up in the wrap episode at the end of the series. But yeah, so it highlights that he says it's been 17 years since their mom died, and the date is on the grave, 1964. But if you were to assume that that it's 1982 now, and this is the episode, like this is the age they would be in 1982, we've already gone a little bit off track because Rodney only aged half a year and a year. This would have made Del 19 when she died, not 16. So again, we already said there was a couple of... Again, we're just doing this completely for fun. John Sullivan probably did not have notes where he wrote down the continuity, and it's completely harmless. It's just... These are a couple of references that we're going to use in that callback.
Yeah, he wasn't to know that internet sleuths in the future would start making notes on all this continuity about the ages.
No,
so.
And it really doesn't matter. It's just for fun. So
Mum weren't to know that, was she?
Yeah.
So
she didn't know about the futures market because there wasn't one when she was alive. Yeah, that's the thing. So I I like the scene overall. It slows the episode down considerably because normally you would get right off and hit the ground running with the plot. There's quite a lot of dialogue before they really talk about painting the Chinese takeaway. So I think that might be what you were talking about, it being quite slow paced. It's necessary. But...
Yes. Not a lot of sort of standout lines, I would say, in this particular exchange. I mean, again, it's not that it's a bad... It's important dialogue for the sense that we get a lot of history and stuff. And again, we see more of the setup of the relationship between Del and Rodney, but there's not really any standout funny moments in that whole exchange that I would highlight. So
a bit of character development, a bit of understanding about how Rodney feels about his mom's death. Yeah, it's all kind of necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I had. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. So then they arrive at the Golden Locust, presumably the next day.
It is actually the Golden Lotus. Del just says it wrong.
Yeah, so So I thought it was the Golden Locust because you said in the next scene that's what Del says. But yeah, I was like, why would anyone name their Chinese takeaway Locust? So that would be pretty gross. But I suppose it doesn't matter. And then we find out that Grandad is Rodney's assistant, which is just the most ridiculous choice. But isn't that always the case? Grandad's always Rodney's assistant. We get that again when they decorate Denzel's flat in the next series. And then a cat runs out and Del makes a joke.
It's going to please Mr. Chin, isn't it?
Oh, was it his pet?
No, but number 39's off the menu.
And this is quite interesting, the exchange here that they have about...
Do you reckon the rumours about these places is true then?
What? No, of course not.
Well, that looked pretty alarmed about something.
And this is quite interesting for me because when I first said I was moving to Hong Kong, I thought, and a lot of other people thought in my friendship group, that they ate cats and dogs in Hong Kong, which they don't. No. But I think it's something that I think the countries, from my understanding, within Asia now that I know do still eat dogs. Mainland China definitely does. They have the Yulin Dog Festival. I think that's one of the most famous ones. In Korea, I believe they still eat dogs in certain areas, and then also in the Philippines, they eat dogs as well.
This is a Chinese takeaway, so you're right. That he's right? Because it's mainland China.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think when I talk about Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is China also, but yeah, I was just. That's one of the things that I thought was a misconception, certainly when I moved to Hong Kong, that was the case. But yeah, so that's a very specific joke, a culturally specific joke. And then Del looks in the till, which I thought was quite funny. I was
just going to take money.
What if he'd found money in there? Was he just going to steal it? I mean, that's like really bad.
I guess.
Yeah, the kitchen, is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, if you thought someone was going to come and paint, would you not move all the pots and pans, like especially the ones that are hanging on the walls? I mean, surely you need to be able to get to the walls.
Yeah, do you want me to...
It was a bit strange.
I have in my notes what's the description of the kitchen from the script, so I can just read this. It will fit in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it says, the kitchen is a nightmare vision. The kind of kitchen we all fear may exist. Dirty and greasy, littered with unwashed pots and pans, lumps of meat and veg lay rotting on the worktop, and Del notices the look of horror on Rodney's face. That's what it says in the script.
Oh, yeah. That explains it then. Yeah. But yeah, it really is disgusting. I always remember thinking that when I was a kid. I think that's what always put me off eating in Chinese takeaways, to be honest, when I was a kid, because I saw this kitchen. I was like,
probably not far off realistic. I mean, like, all kitchens are greasy. It's impossible to not have a greasy kitchen. You have to clean the grease traps regularly. You have to like scrape grease from the stove. Like, it's very common. Unless it's an oil.
I mean, Jenny's worked in a kitchen, so she knows this.
The grease is a big problem because
experience.
grease is not easy to clean. So yeah.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have been able to paint a greasy wall because paint.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So overall, this is just a bit. Yeah, it's a bit much, I would say. And yes, I'm surprised they didn't clean away the tins and the pots and pans and stuff because it would make it impossible. Then we have one of my favourite exchanges here where we start talking about the paint and the little tiny tins that it comes in.
Oh, yeah?
What?
And just what am I supposed to do with them soppy little tins? Look, I can't even get me brush in them.
Can't even get his brush in him. He can't even work that little problem out. Oh, go on. Tell him how to do it, Grandad.
You get a pair of scissors and trim your brush up.
Yeah. No, you don't get a pair of scissors and trim your brush up.
I mean, it is a pretty ridiculous thing to say because, of course, it is a very obvious solution, which is the one Del, of all people, comes up with. You'd think that Del would be the one who is like coming up with the stupid solutions, but then Rodney and Grandad are the really dumb ones here. But yes, you pour it into a bigger container, don't you? Rodney says he won't paint. Oh yeah, that's right. Del implies that the paint might be stolen. Everything's stolen, isn't it, Rodney? Come on. And we have the classic Rodney's protesting again if the paint is stolen. And Grandad puts it down a bit sharpish as well when he thinks it's stolen. But then Mr. Chin arrives in the middle of all this bit.
You the painter? No. He's the painter. I'm his apprentice.
Yeah, right. No, they are the best. The very best.
And I mean, I actually have never met anyone with the surname Chin in Hong Kong. I've met a lot of Chans and Zhengs and all this sort of stuff, but never a Chin. So I don't know how common that name is actually. Maybe it's more common in mainland China, but in Hong Kong, I've never met anyone called Chin. But of course, if you didn't have him called Mr. Chin, you couldn't do the classic joke.
Don't worry, Mr. Chin. In fact, chin up.
So he asks Del what the colour's going to be. Now, again, I can't believe that you wouldn't want to choose the colour that your own kitchen is going to be painted, but maybe Del talked him into it or something, I don't know. And then even Del doesn't know what colour the paint is in these little tins, and Rodney's trying to take it off while Del is distracting Mr. Chin.
Well, you see, what I thought the colour these walls should be.
Blue.
What?
I like blue.
Blue. Ah, blue. Je sans frontières.
And then, of course, the tin gets opened and it turns out to be yellow. And then Del bullshits and says,
What I thought we'd do is we would paint them gold.
That is yellow.
This is gold, Rodney. What is the matter with you? Are you illiterate or something? No, I thought of gold because I remembered the name of your beautiful restaurant. Gold for the Golden Locust.
Yeah, obviously Del is the master at these sorts of situations. His ability to improvise when things go awry is absolutely fantastic. And this is where we find out that the reason Mr. Chin is having his kitchen painted is because he had an anonymous call.
I had a telephone call from a man. He did not give me his name. What? He tells me, get your kitchen painted or you'll be in big trouble, John, huh?
Then Mr. Chin leaves, looking quite happy, I suppose, considering. And we get again another line where Del says,
Well, come on, we must now say Chow Min.
Yeah, then Del reveals he set the whole thing up to Rodney and Grandad to try and get rid of the paint because he's got lumbered with the paint.
Yeah.
And he takes a load of boxes with him when he leaves. And finally we have Grandad saying,
Hey, what about all this grease and filth, Del boy? You arranged for anyone to clean it up?
Of course I have. What do you think I am, a cowboy or something? There's a tin of Ajax and a rubber glove in that bucket.
So, yeah, that's all I have for this scene. Anything you want to add?
No, the only note I had here is one of the funniest lines I found was when they're first getting out the car and Grandad says,
You can't expect me to paint with my feet, Del boy.
I don't expect you to paint with your feet.
But yeah, like it is a bit harsh having an old man like Grandad do all that hard work. Painting is really hard, and it's not something you can just blag your way through. It requires quite a lot of. I mean, maybe I'm just not a natural at it, but every time I've painted, I've had to do a lot of prep work and to get it look good. You got to know what you're doing, and that paint probably wouldn't have gone on very nicely, but obviously we don't know. That's not worth thinking about. The only other note I had was when Mr. Chin is explaining that he received an anonymous phone call. He did not tell me his name. As he's saying that, because David Jason like does that look back at Rodney, it
Yes.
really looks like Mr. Chin is gonna laugh. He had to hold it together pretty well. You can see the laugh coming because of the way the audience is reacting to David Jason's face. He gets through it pretty well, but obviously it was shot in front of the studio audience and you can see everyone laughing a lot.
Yeah, and actually Del looking back at Rodney like that is giving him away that it was Del who did it as well.
Otherwise, you will be in big trouble, John. John.
Yeah,
Yeah. Love that one. Okay, yeah.
It's funny that he recalls the exact words that were said in the phone call, because usually people don't quote directly from a phone call they had a few weeks ago, presumably. So
yeah, especially when his name's not John, but yeah, like
yeah. But anyway, yeah, so, and then we go back to the flat for the next scene, and we have Grandad and Rodney are back at the flat, and Grandad is watching 3 televisions again. Continued all the way through. As long as Leonard Pierce is there, we have the 3 television thing.
Is it 3 though, or 2? Because I thought that
I think
Pauline
it's 3,
says 3, and he always is watching just the black and white and the.
I thought it was 3 in this scene.
Maybe I'd have to go back and look.
I'd have to go back and look again. I wrote 3, but yeah, maybe I got confused, but I thought it was 3. And then Rodney says that Del has been going out and is acting evasive. And Rodney surmises that perhaps Del's been making money on the side and leaving them out of it while they've been painting the Chinese takeaway. But then Del comes home. Straight away, he asks for the money from the job. And then he starts counting it on the table. And Rodney starts inquiring more.
What you been up to, Del?
Oh, bits and pieces.
Where you been?
There and back.
So what you been doing?
This and that.
And then he says he's been doing something private. That's all he'll reveal to Rodney and Grandad. And they don't seem to pry much more beyond that, which is, I guess, quite nice that they don't. Then Del says they're going to split the money 3 ways. And he gives Grandad 35. So this is out of 150. He gives Grandad 35 and Rodney 40. And then as soon as Rodney starts to protest, he gives him the deep sea diver's watch as a pacifier. And it works. I can't believe this stuff still works, but it does. And then the doorbell rings and Del sends Grandad to go and answer the door, and Grandad says,
Oh, my legs are older than yours.
I know, that means I've had more experience, haven't I?
And then we've got this conversation that's a little bit throwaway between Del and Rodney about the deep sea diver's watch, where Del says,
Oh, the bloke said don't get it in the water.
So again, you'd imagine, as always, everything that Del has got something wrong with it. I wondered if his deep sea diver's watch, because he said he got 2 of them, I wonder if his one works and the one he gave to Rodney didn't work, and that was why he gave it to him. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say that like the thing is, Rodney's amazed by the fact that he only gets 40 quid. And then he gets the deep sea diver's watch and he's like, oh yeah, I'm happy then. I'm fine with the 40 quid. But the deep sea diver's watch was supposed to be a freebie for painting, not like part of the payment, right? So like, but he always forgets.
Exactly.
Because Del always uses that tactic of the long distracting speeches that take away from the original argument. And usually by the time he's got to the end of all that, Rodney's forgotten. But yeah.
Well, that's exactly what happens next in the scene. Yeah. That you just mentioned that. So, so we have Trigger arrive, and he's come around to sell Del some more paint. So here we find out that Del got the paint from Trigger. So here we see Trigger being the villain again, that side of him that we don't see in later years. And he actually outright admits that they have nicked it from British Rail. Him and Monkey Harris, I believe it is, because he says they almost got caught stealing it.
Yeah.
And Rodney, of course, has his classic reaction to that, where he gets all mad because, God forbid, Del would ever get caught up with something that's illegal.
Yeah.
It's just not like Del at all. And then Del does this really, I think I wrote long-winded. Maybe it's a little bit much, this thing. I understand the purpose of it, obviously, but when he talks about how stealing this was good for Britain.
Soon this country will be rich and famous again. The starving shall be fed. The homeless will be home.
And then Rodney, as you mentioned earlier, has forgotten why he was protesting in the first place, and he just says,
"This watch is broke."
A bit of a slow moment in the episode, but actually, sorry, just before that speech, Trigger mentioned that they were using the paint in tunnels because Grandad said he recognised the colour, and then Trigger said,
"This ain't the stuff they paint trains with. They use this for painting signs in tunnels."
And then that's when, after Del's speech about why stealing from British Rail is good for Britain, Grandad says,
Tunnels?
What'd you say?
No, he said that.
Trigger said tunnels. He said they use that stuff to paint signs in tunnels. Well, how can you see a sign in a tunnel? It's black, isn't it?
No, this is luminous paint.
It's luminous, Grandad. That means you can see in the luminous! Bloody luminous!
Which is a great reaction from David Jason. And he also says a really funny mix-up word here where he says,
What do you think I am, physic or something?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning here that in the script it actually says psychic. So I wonder if David Jason maybe improvised that because he knows Del gets words wrong. Because if that was an improvisation, that's really good that he did that, because I think that's really funny the way he messes that up. And then we have the phone ring. So that this scene is quite, one thing after the other, but we have the phone ring and Grandad answers and it's Mr. Chin. And Del says, "Tell him I'm out." And Mr. Chin asks on the phone to Grandad where Del's gone, presumably, because Grandad says,
No, Del's gone out. I'm not sure. Where you going to, Del?
Again, Grandad, he always steals the show when he has those lines. And then this is a very funny moment, of course, where we get the big reveal where we cut, even though we're on the phone to Mr. Chin, we cut to Mr. Chin's location and he's in his restaurant's kitchen wearing a pair of sunglasses. Yeah. And he says, "What have you got to know?" And we see how crazy they're glowing. I mean, it is insane. How could you ever work in a room like that? And then we have another wonderful moment of improvisation from Del where he says it's a new energy saving paint to cut down on electricity bills. And to think of that in the moment is very sharp. And then Mr. Chin wants Del to paint his living room in it.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Which is just, unbelievable. But then at the end of the scene, we have Del suddenly realizing something is wrong.
My God!
Something wrong, Del?
What have I done? It's all your fault. It's your fault, you and your stupid pain.
So we don't know what it is at this moment, but we obviously are quite concerned because he seems really upset about it and he blames Trigger for it. And then he decides, instead of telling them what the problem is, he says Grandad and Rodney had better go with him. And he keeps giving Trigger these annoyed looks as though he's going to get even with Trigger for what he's done. But at this point, we don't know what it is. So I think that's everything for that scene that I've got written down. Anything you want to add?
Just a couple of notes. Just to go back to the beginning, when Trigger comes in, he calls Rodney Dave. Still no reaction or laugh from the audience. So we're still, we've got most of the way through series 2 here without really getting much of a reaction on that. But they're keeping it up. And I actually timed how long it was between when Trigger says tunnels to when Grandad realizes tunnels. It's 2 full minutes of dialogue. So Del's big speech about stealing from British Rail fills most of that time. I think that's quite clever, his whole speech about how he justifies it. I think it's interesting because he's looking at the cultural, the current times and the unemployment and stuff. So, he doesn't feel bad about this stuff, about stealing. When he looks at it with this point of view, he can convince anybody of anything. And that's an interesting part of his character. And the only other note I had was, is it a coincidence that Rodney's wearing a yellow t-shirt? Because you never see him wearing this again. So I just thought maybe it's funny that he's wearing a yellow t-shirt for a Yellow Peril.
That's an interesting observation.
Although I think you do see him wearing this t-shirt again, but only underneath other stuff. He's never usually just wearing the t-shirt.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I have not been paying attention to the costumes at all, really. So it's interesting you mentioned that. Yeah,
it's just a maybe. It maybe means something, it maybe doesn't.
Oh, sorry, there is one more thing where he says...
Bankrupt stock, you said?
British Rail, same thing, isn't it?
Right. Anything government is bankrupt, right? So, that's it. That's all I had for that scene.
Okay, so then we go to the final scene of the episode, and we are this time outside the. Well, we don't know if it's the graveyard at the beginning of the scene, but they pull up outside this gate, and Del gets out the car first and goes over, and we get a shot, back onto David Jason, and his face is kind of lit up by this light, and we don't know what it is at this point. Then Grandad and Rodney come on over. I really love the way that Leonard Pierce delivers this line when he says,
"Oh my good God."
I just love something about his voice. It's just fantastic. And then we realise that Del has painted their mother's grave in the luminous paint.
Yeah.
they have sort of a few jokes here. Rodney says a few things about the grave is going to become like a beacon for
every Satanist and acid head in England.
But Grandad steals the show with the line,
What worries me, it's on the main flight path to Heathrow.
I'm not really sure the reason for writing it like this, but Del makes out that he's not going to apologize for it and he doesn't regret doing it, and it's a good thing. And then he looks back at it and then he changes his mind and he says,
We'll put it down to vandals. Let's get out of here before we get our collars felt.
and that's the last line of the episode. So I feel like this episode has quite a weak ending overall. I'm not sure how they could have ended it better, but I think the ending is it's a bit sort of forgettable. And I almost feel like this episode has two stories simultaneous. You've got like the story of the Chinese takeaway, and then you've got the story of the mom's grave. And maybe that's why I felt that it wasn't as strong as an episode, because it hasn't got like a central story that we focus on. It's got like two stories going side by side, maybe. And the paint is the thing that connects them both. But yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I think so some episodes end on a really good line. Like we just did No Greater Love last week, and we agreed that the line is good. Well, it's a punchline or a joke of some kind. And some of them end like this, where it's more of a visual thing, and they end with like them going, oh no, or something, and just walking away. So yeah, I do feel like they're a bit weaker when they're like this, where it's more of a visual thing, and then they don't have anything necessarily funny to say about it. I would agree. I think, like, you're right. The second that Del is missing when they get back from the Chinese takeaway and they're like, oh, where is he? You get a sense that there's another storyline. And it is a little bit of a pace, disruption to the pace of the episode, because now we know there's something else. But for some reason, it doesn't work very well. I don't know why. It kind of derails the pace of the episode. I like the fact that they do the reveal of the grave, and maybe they should have just revealed the grave and then kicked in with the credits. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
It's still early days, and they haven't quite got the kick at the end of the episode right in these early series.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the dialogue after the reveal of the grave probably brings down the energy a bit, because again, it's not like the dialogue is particularly that funny. The stuff they say to each other after the grave is revealed, particularly Del's protestation that it's fine that he did it and he's happy with it, because he's clearly not. I mean, that's why he went and got all stressed in the flat when he realized what he'd done. So
I mean, I put a note here because this is something Nicholas Lyndhurst had said. They put lights inside an actual fiberglass monument to make it glow like that. And it was so bright that the nearby traffic kept slowing down to see what it was. He said, we were lucky we didn't cause an accident. So yeah, like I said earlier, they actually filmed it outside a proper graveyard gate. So the glow actually did cause probably what would have in real life if it had been painted luminous. Like, it would have attracted a lot of attention.
That's so funny. It's almost like Grandad's line about the flight path is quite accurate.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, and that makes me think of Sky's the Limit a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
But honestly, even if it weren't luminous paint, can you actually picture a grave painted bright yellow? I think it would look kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always thought that. Yeah, or even if the paint, as you say, wasn't luminous, just having a painted grave is very strange to me. I can't think of any time I've ever seen a painted grave, or like you say, a coloured grave like that. Maybe sort of some marble, maybe greenish marble or something like that, or slightly blue, but nothing bright yellow. I think that would be quite strange, or even if it wasn't luminous, it would probably be a bit of a beacon, as Rodney said.
But still, I mean, it is a Del, so we don't know what he's thinking with style, and he might think it looked cool, but I just can't picture in the middle of a graveyard full of grey stone, a bright yellow painted fiberglass monument would look kind of gaudy, but perhaps it fits with Del's style pretty well.
That's true. There is one thing I've just thought of actually, which I don't really, like to talk too much about the episodes from the 2000s, but when they go back to the mom's grave, I think it's in Sleepless in Peckham, I think it's in the last one, they go back to this grave, and Del has done exactly what he said he might do in this episode about adding to the headstone, and they've added loads of different stuff on top because they became millionaires and they paid for an upgrade on the headstone. So I think that's quite a nice callback. That they had the conversation about it, and then when they finally had enough money, they did exactly that and added loads of stuff to it. So,
that's cool.
Just a nice thing.
Yeah, I don't have any other notes.
No, me neither. Okay, so let's move on to the awards for this week.
And guess what? He's only one.
So as always, we have 3 awards to announce this week. So we will start with Plonker of the Week.
I don't believe it. What a plonker. What a plonker.
So let's start with your nomination this week, dude. Who have you nominated for Plonker of the Week?
So in this episode, I was trying to think, because honestly, there's some plonkerish sort of stuff from a lot of people, but I guess I'd have to say Del. And the reason I said Del is because he kind of cheats and uses Grandad and Rodney he's very manipulative in this episode towards Rodney in particular. And he kind of gets them to go and do all the painting and he doesn't, bother with it. And then I don't know. I just feel like Del is a bit stupid in this episode for some reason and quite manipulative. Yeah.
I mean, I wrote Del as my nomination too, but for a different reason, like that he was stupid not to know anything about the paint, but I guess that's the same reason he's a plonker a lot of the time. He does go in gung-ho a lot of the time without checking on anything, but it's also like Trigger is an honorable mention of a plonker for not telling him it's luminous paint. Like, it's a very specific type of paint that he's selling. Like, it's not just paint, but maybe Trigger didn't realize that it glowed even though it was called luminous. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, we don't know if Trigger understands what luminous is, but I guess he kind of does, because he goes, nah, this is luminous paint when he says about the tunnels. So actually, he would know.
He does know,
It means it's bright, it's brighter, it lights up.
But yeah, again, perhaps he could be excused because he's making a sale, like he doesn't care.
That's true. I guess you could also argue that Mr. Chin is a bit of a plonker for deciding to get his takeaway painted on an anonymous phone call from someone.
Yeah.
I mean, if some anonymous person called me and went, you need to do this, I wouldn't do it. That seems a bit strange. So.
Maybe it was more normal in them days. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I guess he did say something. Did he mention the health inspector or something? And that's why he had to get it painted?
He says that it was an anonymous phone call warning him that the health inspector would be coming by soon, right? Yeah.
That reminded me of Fawlty Towers a little bit.
Yeah.
Every time I hear health inspector, I always think of Fawlty Towers.
Yes.
So are we going to give it to Del?
Yeah, let's give it to Del. Del is Plonker of the Week.
It's all your fault.
Well done, Del.
Okay, well done, Del. So
this week, Heather is going to award the best line of the episode, and I will choose the best moment. So, dude, what have you chosen for your favourite line of the episode?
Now, this was a difficult one because, as I mentioned, I don't really rate sort of the humor in this episode a lot, and I always think best line is like a humorous one. But the line that makes me laugh the most in this episode, I guess, every time I hear it, is Grandad's solution to the paintbrush not fitting into the tins, and Del's reaction to it. So when Grandad says,
"You get a pair of scissors and trim your brush up." Yeah.
No, you don't get a pair of scissors and trim your brush up.
Yeah, I think that's really funny, that line. But maybe you have some honourable mentions.
Not really. I just worked on my favourite moment, but I think the best moment kind of speaks for itself. It's really the moment where Mr. Chin is revealed on the phone with his sunglasses and he turns around and then you see the other employees walking around the kitchen with their sunglasses on. I do think that is always the moment everyone remembers the most. This episode.
No, I agree. Yeah, because I have to think about it, obviously, even though I'm not awarding it. And I put, what have you done to my walls?
Yeah.
And also the reveal of the grave is the other one.
Yeah.
Because those are the two big moments that, as you say, everyone remembers, and they're the funniest moments in the episode.
Okay, yeah. So if you don't have any more honourable mentions?
No, I think that's everything.
Okay. Drink up, we're leaving.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for this week. Join us next week when we'll be discussing Series 2, Episode 6, It Never Rains. But until then, zoom, chase the day away. Au revoir, listeners. If you like what you hear and want to contact us, you can email us at longlivehooky street podcast@gmail.com. All one word, no spaces. Bonjour.